Number 453. Fast Forward or Stop Being Stupid, Part 14 by Anna von Reitz. It is summer 2014. For the last 10 years, the evil forces have been marching steadily onward, and their plans are all too apparent. All the federal alphabet soup agencies have been armed to the teeth. Billions of rounds of ammo have been purchased. The local police have been armed with tactical weapons and armored vehicles and are swaggering around looking nervous and fingering billy clubs made of titanium and steel. Every day reports come in of police brutality, more and more evictions and foreclosures, over 1 million children missing from our streets and schools, test scores in the toilet, and then word comes that vast FEMA camps have been built and stocked and provided with armed guards. There are even rumors of vast underground bases built over the course of the Cold War, large enough to house thousands of people, entire cities underground. The federal government, doing business as United States Incorporated, all caps, a storefront governmental services corporation for the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is preparing for something big, the extermination of its priority creditors, the American people. The bosses running the United States Incorporated stand to make at least $1 million per dead American as a result of life insurance policies paid for with their own tax money. And then they also get to collect on all the abandoned estate property and resell it to new suckers. And they get to avoid paying the debt that they owe these Americans. Just forget it, write it off. They're dead, they can't collect. And finally, they get to charge the victims' estates and their kids and grandkids for all this service, i.e. killing the innocent Americans who are their priority creditors. Real nice, slick job. Hey, just cut to the chase this time. They learned a lot from World War II when they killed off all the Jewish people in Germany who were also their priority creditors, the ones who faithfully bought all those German and British government bonds that the rats defaulted on. Beginning with George W. Bush and continuing through 2014 with Barack Crazy Legs Obama, they just figured the final solution would be easy this time. They planned it all properly, invested the money, and test marketed all the excuses they could think of to get something started. World War III, a race war of blacks against whites, a religious war of Muslims against Christians, ISIS, cannibal Catholic priests, sovereign citizens, you name it. They test marketed every angle they could think of, and they came up empty except for a few minor riots in little name places, but boy howdy, they kept trying to get something going, some spark. They even tried stupid stuff like transgender bathrooms, for pity's sake. By the middle of 2014, it was obvious where this was headed, another fake civil war on American soil, with Americans being the targeted population, eradicated by their own dear federal government under the pretense of protecting us. When government agencies start sucking up billions of rounds of ammo and government departments start buying millions of body bags and stockpiling them in internment camps on American soil, you kinda gotta figure that there's something going on, Virginia, and it's not nice. Well, what it is that the national debt had come due, and since they already siphoned off the national credit, plus all the cream from double-dipping both the American Public Trust and the United States Treasury, these criminals figured that even if they nationalized, that is, stole, every bank account and every IRA in America, they still wouldn't be able to pay off their creditors. Truth be told, they never wanted to pay off their creditors. That was not their intention. It was never part of the plan. It was just the old Nazi flim-flam dance with a few twists of communist rumba thrown in. Steal from the masses for the elites, then kill off the masses so they never have to pay anything back. And it was happening right here on Main Street, right in front of all of our faces, while the mainstream media prattled on about high temperatures in the Midwest and the latest celebrity divorce. It was started by Bush, the Republican. It was continued by Obama, the Democrat. It was supported by members of Congress for over a decade, making appropriation after appropriation. Billions upon billions of dollars were spent. Your money, but what the hell, huh? They weren't figuring on paying you back except with a bullet through the back of your trusting skull, or a nice shower in a gas-filled room without windows. Oh, my government would never do that. Well, here's the news. It's not your government. It hasn't been your government in 150 years. It's not even a government. It's a governmental services corporation. Yeah, you heard it right. A commercial corporation in the business of selling you government services, and they just sell you whatever they want to sell you at any price they want to charge and chuck it all up to you on your credit cards and your kids' credit cards and your grandkids' credit card. That thing in Washington, D.C., that is not your government at all, and which has never been your government, which has been owned and operated by foreign governments ever since it was spawned, and which has abused your trust and stolen you blind and used your sons and daughters for gun fodder in wars for profit. For the last 150 years, that thing, which has never been a sovereign government of any kind, was getting ready to kill you for profit for all the reasons enumerated above. And they really thought they could come up with a storyline, an excuse, and get away with it. They did. They spent billions of dollars betting that they could get away with it, and somehow everyone would believe them. Just like they believed the Warren Commission and the Blue Ribbon 9/11 Commission. You had all better thank your lucky stars and kiss the ground and pray that you're true to your true God, and give thanks from your hearts that there are still Americans who can tell cow pies from shoe polish. And then when you're done with that, you can thank the Russians and the Red Chinese and all the other people around the world who've been victimized by these same vermin, because frankly the only thing that has kept these criminals in check is the stark fact that once they start their killing spree, they'd have the Americans on one side and the rest of the world on the other, with nothing but their own pathetic rumps in between. In 2014, we took an unprecedented step. We issued general civil orders to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We told them what was going on, and we told them explicitly what to do about it. We stood on our own flat feet in our sovereign capacity as American state nationals, acting under the last man standing rule, and we read the Joint Chiefs of Staff the Riot Act in language they could understand. And then we published these general civil orders from coast to coast and around the world, and we sent copies to heads of state and to the Pope and the Queen and the heads of all the security services worldwide. And we fingered the rats for what they were up to. What kind of reception did we get? Why, blank astonishment. If a horse had started rattling off orders, they couldn't have been more amazed, amused, outraged, astounded. What are these people talking about? Well, ignore them. Tin hats. But then there was Benghazi, and have you checked out what the engineers and architects for 9/11 truth dug up? And oh, dang. General Dempsey needs a new pair of shoes. Shut your mouth or you will lose your commission. But they heard it. They had to hear it. It was repeated. It was placed in the public record. It was recorded. It was rebroadcast. It was published all over the internet. The Dalai Lama saw it. The people in Western Australia heard about it. The flipping koala bears heard it. And even if they initially thought we were crazy, the fact remains that they heard what we said, and as time progressed and the pieces fell in place, they'd remember it. They'd all remember it, and that's why losing plausible deniability is such a B. Just ask Hillary Clinton. The men responsible for the outrages this world has endured for the past century and a half have to work in darkness. They have to have secrecy. They have to own the media. They have to pay off reporters. If anyone knew even half what they were doing and reported on it, the jig would be up for them. They'd be hunted down like muskrats and skinned in their own holes, hanged with piano wire and trussed up in public gibbets in the marketplaces, and nobody would public gibbets in the marketplaces. Nobody would blink an eyelash except to spit on them. So when you accuse them in advance of their evil intentions, it spoils their plot line. It exposes them as if nobody lifts an eyebrow, because it exposes them even if nobody lifts an eyebrow, because the thought process has been set in motion, and the thing that sounds crazy today makes sense tomorrow. It's important for America to wake up. Desperately important. All those nice people in Washington, D.C., the ones you have looked up to and trusted and given your proxy to, they have enslaved and defrauded you and stole your identity, your credit, your land, your homes, your businesses, and left you to pay their debts. And when it was time for them to pay you back with interest for all this abuse, they plotted against you to kill you, because they owed you money, and killing you off was just so much more profitable. And now that you are coming out of your stupor and realize that congressman is a truly dirty word, here's something else you have to understand. These same vermin have been out and about and around the world for the last 150 years, killing, robbing, pillaging, plundering, raping, drinking, drugging, pimping, kidnapping, and promoting war in your name. In your name. Americans are being blamed heartily all over this planet for the misdeeds and criminality of the people who have stood there and claimed to, quote, represent you. No wonder Americans are hated, from the Hebrides to the Black Sea to the Indian Ocean and beyond. No wonder the crazy Muslims shout God is great and kill themselves in defiance of what they perceive as pure evil, because in their experience, America has been made synonymous with evil. I am not condoning any madman killing innocent people in a school or a shopping mall, folks, but I am telling you that the things these federal vermin have done in your names would make your stomachs turn. You would lose your lunches for a year, and that's why you must draw a line in the sand and make a distinction between, quote, America and, quote, the United States, and, quote, the United States of America. You must know the difference, and you must make it stick. You must call the shots before they are played, and stand tall for the consequences, because that is the only way the rest of the world can know the difference between you and those who have pretended to be your proxies and agents while practicing every vile sin known to man. Otherwise, the rest of the world thinks you're good with starving babies and killing pregnant women for sport. They think it's okay with you that you poison water wells and kill livestock people depend on for their lives. They assume that, hey, these people work for you, so you must be the devil incarnate. You must be worse than pond scum. They will never know the truth, that you have been victims too, that you have been lied to and defrauded and enslaved and abused by these same monsters, and that you have not condoned their evil until you wake up and face the truth. See this and over 700 other articles on Anna's website, AnnaVonReitz.com. Support her work generously via PayPal. You spell her name ANNAVONREITZ.com. Political Status and Law, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 15. By Anna Von Reitz. I'm reading from AnnaVonReitz.com. Law is not a good thing simply by its nature. It arises out of religion, which is supposed to be a matter of free will, but seldom is. And then it erects barriers and presumptions based on whatever system of law you're encountering. All systems of law are essentially rules for the game of life, but it's up to you to choose the rules you're operating under, and that then determines how you play it. So let's go over the basics. In the beginning of recorded history, we lived under the Noahide laws, known as the law of the sea. This is the form of law that existed prior to the flood and has existed ever afterwards. There is no evidence in the Standard Bible that Noah was a lawgiver like Moses, but his name got attached to these laws anyway. Later in firmly recorded history, the international law of the sea was bifurcated into two functional groupings, one called law merchant or maritime, or civil law or commercial law, which concerns itself with civilians and civilian commerce, and one called admiralty, which concerns itself with military or governmental commerce on the high seas. The law merchant was first codified by Hammurabi, and so the whole tradition of federal code rests on a practice of codifying international commercial law that goes back thousands of years. These law systems are all pagan and mostly satanic in origin. Satan was and is the original lord of the sea, a pirate's pirate, and were most recently overhauled by the Romans to create Roman civil law, which is the basis of 90% of what goes on in courtrooms across America today. Again, these are laws stemming from the beliefs and ethical practices of pagan traditions. Key to this is understanding the idea of trading and honor and contracts. Anyone can make any kind of offer, no matter how outrageous it may be, and if you accept it, it becomes the law established between the parties. You can have implied contracts, also called presumed contracts, unilateral contracts, verbal contracts, and formal written contracts. While anyone may offer any proposal at all, such as offering to cut off your head and charge you for the pleasure of doing it, it is considered very rude to arbitrarily or absolutely refuse an offering. Thus, you must counter-offer, or you dishonor the offer and the one making it. In the example given, you might reply, "I am fond of my head, and so I counter-offer to run my sword through your gizzard instead." This sort of trading smacks of the Three Musketeers and the bantering that still goes on in Italian and Spanish and Greek marketplaces today. Contracts only exist under these forms of law. All contracts and contractual practices which allow lying undetected are pagan and satanic in origin. A much more common contractual offering today is when a bank, a corporation, offers your straw man persona a home loan. The essence of the offer is that the straw man gives the bank your money in credit. The bank then credits the straw man's account with the bank for this theft and writes a check in his name for the balance, which the bank misrepresents as a loan to you, and then charges you interest equal to 3 to 5 times the total value of the loan, and cheats you out of all the mortgage payments by claiming that the straw man abandoned the funds in his inactive escrow account, and also claims that undeserved and unearned security interest in your actual house as the bank share of this contractual offer. It is the modern day equivalent of "let me cut off your head and charge you for the pleasure of doing so," and yet somehow, no matter how outrageous the offer really is, millions of people have been deceived by the bank's false advertising of a loan and the natural false assumption that the bank is offering to loan them money instead of offering to take their own assets and loan them back at outrageous interest. In Roman civil law, all is fair so long as you don't get caught. Note the adage, "Let him be deceived who will be deceived." And this is completely natural to and to be expected from any law system that stems from the worship of the father of all lies. The remedy to this is that also under Roman civil law, fraud vitiates, that is, nullifies everything it touches. Once it is detected, and the crime of fraud is no statute of limitations. So you can go after the perpetrators and their successors and pierce the corporate veil and go after their shareholders too once you discover and prove that you've been defrauded. The most basic level of fraud for Americans is that you have been reclassified as a citizen and made subject to Roman civil law without your knowledge or consent. So you're left in the dark and acting under false assumptions about what game you're playing and under what rules. How can you win under such circumstances? Well, you can't. It's like trying to play bridge using the rules for poker. And this is why the, quote, United States District Court judges peer over their desks at you and tell you that the Constitution does not apply in their courts. It doesn't. They aren't addressing you as a red-blooded American. They're addressing a foreign national who freely admits to being a U.S. citizen of some kind, and they're proceeding under the system of law that foreign national has chosen, which is Roman civil law. How is this possible? Why? Via lies and deceit, of course. Within hours of your birth, the foreign corporations charged with providing your states with 19 stipulated governmental services come to your mother still in her hospital bed and deliberately, self-interestedly, and under color of law, which is pretending that it is your law and that the requirement applies to you when it doesn't, they have you signed over as a ward of their state corporation. Now, this is not your state of the union. This is a federal franchise operation merely calling itself something deceptively similar. Instead of the California state or even the California state with a capital S in the beginning of state, they are operating the federal territorial state of California, or the all-cap state of California, which is even worse, a municipal franchise state. Mom, dead, tired, hurting, in a daze, trusting, signs the paperwork, completely unaware that she is, even in a foreign jurisdiction, much less on her guard against legal chicanery, leading to the enslavement of her newborn baby to the devil and subjecting him to Roman civil law. Under Roman civil law, the vendor argues, well, this, quote, informant came to us and said this baby was a fatherless bastard and abandoned, and that it was a all capital U.S. lowercase citizen. So we took the little pauper under our wing and did the decent thing. Here's the paperwork. Here's the informant's name, your mother, and the doctor witnessed it. Yeah, right. Satan loves dealing in half-truths. The fact is that you were never under their foreign Roman civil law and were never a United States citizen, much less a citizen of the United States. Your mother was never obligated to sign any paperwork and wasn't subject to their pagan law, but by deliberate deceit and racketeering carried out under false pretenses and color of law, they defrauded her of her child and kidnapped you into their foreign jurisdiction. In the process, they created a false identity, a straw man persona named after you. This is required so that you can operate in their system of things and play under their rules. Living people can't form contracts, so you can only operate as a dead man. In other words, as a corporation in their world. In token of the surreptitious change in political status, they issued a birth certificate under your name and gave it to you, memorializing the event of your civil death, in quotes. When the person was born, the man died. When the person dies, the man lives. But both can't exist at the same time, because it's impossible to live under two jurisdictions at once, and equally impossible to play the game of life under two sets of rules at the same time. So you were attacked, robbed of your birthright, defrauded in broad daylight under color of law by your own employees, no less, when you were between a few hours and a few days old. You were kidnapped and transported to a foreign jurisdiction, the international jurisdiction, and made subject to a foreign and profane system of law, international commerce. And neither you nor your mother were ever told a thing about it. That counts as fraud, big time fraud, capital level war crime fraud. And it's going on all day, every day, all over America. Why? Because the federal corporation that is charged with providing your states with 19 enumerated governmental services has gone rogue, completely insane. And all those people you elected to Congress and who pretend to be doing your will and acting in your best interest are instead obligated to act as pure profit mongers and with no other consideration but making money for their shareholders, who are all conveniently dead. This, believe it or not, is how America became the richest nation on earth, by enslaving and kidnapping all of us and setting up generation-skipping trusts in our name so that only those outside the system can access any benefit from it ever. Who figured all this out and implemented it? The Holy See, the Secretary of War circa 1907, the Secretary of Treasury circa 1924, the City of London, Lords of the Admiralty, the British government, and the entire Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration. We know who did it to us, and we know why, and we know how. What remains is what is to be done about it, and what are the options. Slaughtering all members of the bar associations for not telling us has been suggested, but I'm convinced that 95% of the members of the bar association, probably more, are just as stupid as we've been and haven't been taught anything different or better in the law schools, which have also been commandeered. In the meanwhile, while all this is being sorted out, it behooves each American to record their actual political status as an American state national, a Minnesotan, a Texan, etc., and to expatriate from any presumption that you are voluntarily choosing to be a United States citizen or citizen of the United States. So all of that is about the pagan law system known as the law of the sea. I have filed all the paperwork necessary for everyone on this planet to be enabled to make their own informed and truly free will choices about how they want to live and which system of law they want to live under, but so far you've only been allowed to live under the law of the sea in a system devoted to Satan worship. Some people have tried to invoke what they call, quote, natural law as a substitute for the law of the sea. But a closer examination reveals that this is just the law of the sea transplanted onto the land, popularly called the law of the jungle or tooth and claw law, which enshrines whoever is biggest and strongest and most fit to survive, and which is in fact worse than the law of the sea because it's less developed and remedy is limited to whatever the victims can enforce all by themselves. You might as well give the parties to a complaint a set of clubs and call the judge a referee. What about the law of Moses, known as the law of the land, based on the Ten Commandments? This is the law form that we are naturally owed by birthright, the simple law of the land embraced by the Ten Commandments and then established as secular law by the United States statutes at large and our local American common law. When Moses parted the Red Sea and we crossed over, we left the law of the sea behind and began operating as living people operating on the dry land jurisdiction of our native country, taking responsibility for ourselves and subjecting ourselves to the Ten Commandments as our chosen law and our rules for the game of life in America. We don't form contracts because we know that we can't guarantee them. At most, we form good faith agreements. These agreements, sometimes mistakenly called contracts, have specific requirements. They have to involve at least two separate parties who are clearly identified, have to be consensual, have to be fully disclosed, have to be signed in wet ink, and so on. There is no such thing as a unilateral or implied or one-party good faith agreement. This law, the law of the land, is the basis of trade among men as opposed to the law of the sea, which is the basis of commerce among corporations. Are there any other options? Yes, there are. There is the law of the air, the rules of the game of life in the kingdom of heaven. You can freely choose this option because all your debts have been prepaid. Whoever you are, whatever religion you adopt, and wherever you are born. And it doesn't matter what you believe, you can still live in the kingdom of heaven so long as you agree to obey its three simple laws. Number 1, keep the peace. Number 2, love others as you would be loved. And number 3, allow everyone their free will so long as it causes no harm. Just as you were given a birth certificate, which is actually a form of legal death certificate when you were born, you were given a baptismal certificate, which is a passport from where you are to wherever you want to go when you repent of your sins. Just as Moses parted the Red Sea and led people onto dry land out of the pagan sea jurisdiction, and they became a nation of people on the land, and they were given the law of Moses to live under, Jesus parted the curtain in the temple, severing the disconnect between God and man, and led us to the realm of the Holy Spirit and the law of the air jurisdiction. It is not our job in the jurisdiction of the air to judge anyone or separate the goats from the sheep. Both the goats and the sheep belong to our Lord, the one who paid the devil for all of us, though the devil keeps trying to double dip and kidnap us into his jurisdiction. So in the end, creating the kingdom of heaven on earth is up to us. Choosing which law we will subject ourselves to is up to us. Choosing which master we will serve is also our free choice. But it is a choice, and it is a choice which we must consciously, knowingly, with full disclosure make. Law of the sea, law of the land, or law of the air. Bogus contracts, laws, or love. Satan, kings, or Christ. Death, existence, or life abundant. All debts of everyone on this planet have been paid in full. They have been prepaid before the debt is even incurred. That is a fact, the reality. Your debts have already been forgiven, all of them, in every realm of your existence. Every realm of existence. Buddhist, Marxist, atheist, Baha'i, Lithuanian Baptist, it doesn't matter. Your debts in all jurisdictions have literally been prepaid in water, blood, and spirit. You are in fact given the free choice of who you serve, how you will play the game of life, and which set of rules you will live under. So stop letting criminals subject you to the law of Satan and his bogus contracts and his worship of idols, graven images, long after his rule on earth was supposed to end. Don't let the rats snatch your children from their cradles under color of law and subject them to the law of the sea. Shame and expose those who are doing this. Think twice about embracing the law of Moses as your option either, because nobody manages to keep the 10 Commandments. All men are transgressors against the law of the land, and that's with leaving out the rest of the 613 laws the Israelites were supposed to perform. That's why they needed a Messiah to begin with. And as far as the law of love at the present time, that's a hard one too, because we're being called upon to love those who are most unlovable, despicable, Satan worshippers, faithless politicians, and ignorant kin. Indeed, it isn't going to be easy to pick up your cross and follow him, but when you consider the options, where would you rather be? Snatching babies from their cradles and condemning them to a civil death? Condemning people for their circumstances and the weaknesses of their bodies? Or pouring a drink of water for the thirsty and giving rest to the weary? It's your life, your law, your choice to make. See this and over 700 others on Anna's website at AnnaVonReitz.com. You spell that ANNAVONREITZ.com.